Hey everyone, this is Tracy Friedlander. You're listening to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. On the show today, I have violinist Richard Amoroso. Richard is in the violin section of the Philadelphia Orchestra, but he's also a podcaster and an online music educator and business owner. Today we talk about how he built his online business, the unconventional path he had to his Big Five orchestra job. Surprisingly, he didn't even major in music, and what he's creating now for violinists this summer by partnering with a surprise partner, combining their skills and the people they know in the business to create a world-class educational opportunity. You'll hear all about it on the show, and I know it'll inspire you, whether you're creating your teaching business now online, or you're going after an orchestra job, or both, and hearing how a self-starter like Richard did it is always valuable. But before we get started, there's a couple of quick things I want you to know about. So many people are doubling down on their teaching businesses this year. Is that you? Are you thinking about how you could make more money? Maybe even attract more of your ideal students? And wouldn't it be nice if you could actually do that without spending more one-on-one time teaching private lessons, trading hours for dollars? You might even be wondering if that's even possible. If these ideas intrigue you, I want you to know about my new free report, Get More Students, Attract Top Quality Students that are a joy to work with and pay you top dollar. This report will show you how you can make more money, have more time, find your ideal student, and actually build a studio you love. The link to download the report is in the show notes. And by the way, this report is for you whether you have a full studio already or you're starting from scratch, whether you're teaching lessons or looking to attract students or clients to offer them something different in your area of expertise. In addition to that, I also want you to know about a really cool payment and scheduling platform you need to know that can transform the way you schedule your lessons and collect payments. Fons is a company co-founded by a friend of mine, and he's a guitarist, Eric Branner. He was also a guest on Crushing Classical. And Fons streamlines the entire business and admin side of lessons, from scheduling to payments to integrating Zoom into your calendar like everyone is doing now. Fons takes care of it all. When you use Fons, scheduling becomes a breeze. Students get email reminders. They always know the Zoom link. And no more chasing after payments. Everything comes through on one platform and results in a direct deposit to you. If you'd like to try Fons now, for a limited time, you can try it for 15 days free. And if you decide to move your business over to the platform, we both get $100. That's right, they'll credit you $100 if you stick with it. Use my link in the show notes to get that deal. Let's get started. Welcome, Richard.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tracy.
So good to have you on the podcast. So, Richard Amoroso, you are a violinist, you're in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and such an entrepreneurial musician. We met in a program, and I'm so glad we did together.
That's right.
And, we were just chatting right before I hit record about how many, I'm working with musicians who are changing the future narrative of what it's going to look like for how people get educated in the music space. And you're one of those people who's recreating that as well in your business. But I want to start with, one thing I really love about your career is that it was somewhat unconventional in the way that you got your job. Like, it wasn't like it was the traditional perfect conservatory story, and then you win a job when you're 23 or whatever. Like, tell us a little bit about how, like, the unconventional way you went about it.
Okay. I will say this. I had a very conventional childhood. I had a wonderful childhood. I was around my dad, who is such a wonderful man. I love him to death. I still do. And he's, it's funny. We're not that different in age. So, because he had me when he was young, right out of the service. And he had sort of an unconventional road because of the Vietnam War at the time.
But he's a musician.
But he's a musician. And so he was as a musician, but he went to school late because he was in the military, in the Air Force. And then, so anyway.
Was he in a military ensemble, or?
Eventually, yeah. It's a kind of funny story. He was initially a cook, in Michigan and just trying to find a better gig within the military. And he told them that he was a musician and he tried out on some band instrument and he bombed. I mean, because he's not, he's a cellist. And they thought, well, if you're that bad at the trombone, I can only imagine what you do on the cello. So, but but he managed to, his father sent him his cello and he auditioned for something and he got in the Air Force band. And then a little bit, that was just the beginning of the sort of Air Force band with strings and whatnot. So there were very few strings, and that's kind of how he's, made it through the military and whatnot. But then he got back after he was, ending his time there. He, went to PMA, Philadelphia Music Academy. And that's how, and I remember him, I do remember him going to school. I was 4 or 5 at the time, and that's when he was literally getting his certification to teach music, and that's, he brought home a violin, and that's, how I discovered the violin, and it was a really sweet story. I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was just the beginning. But then I had, a very successful childhood. My dad, is a professional cellist. He did eventually sub with the Philadelphia Orchestra. Not only that, but my mom's side of the family is very musical. So my mom's late brother subbed with the Philadelphia Orchestra. That was my first introduction to the orchestra because he was a very successful percussionist in the Philadelphia area. And not only that, but my mom's father, which is my grandfather, obviously subbed with the orchestra on mandolin in the early 70s. Yeah, we have 3 different generations all having sort of dabbled into the Philadelphia Orchestra. So, but eventually what happened, like I had a lot of success. I studied with Norman Carroll, who was the concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra at that time. But then I think that when I look back, I think what happened, my mom got really sick when I was in 9th grade, and she got cancer, breast cancer. And because of that, I think nothing was really kind of normal and regular because we were so worried about her health and my dad as well. And so things just kind of went all over the place. I was still doing a lot of playing with my dad, and he would always have me play, and it was always listening to records with him, and always he was, always helpful. But I think there came a point where I just didn't have a passion, and I just didn't know what to do. And I think when it came time to go to college, I think both my teacher, Norman, and my dad just didn't see in me something, like I had my heart in it. And my dad never pushed me to kind of go into me. He's like, do what what you want to do. And so what happened was I just kind of got away, went to normal 4-year school, 2 years first at Villanova, then 2 years at Dickinson College, and got a degree in economics and whatnot. And then this was like early 90s. And at that time, the economy was really bad. So I was having there was no real job for me. I got married really young. And then next thing you know, I'm like just fishing around. I eventually kind of was able to sort of get some chops up to just at least gig a little bit. And because I was doing a little bit of that at the end of high school, so I had enough abilities there. But I definitely was rusty at that point. And then basically,
you said you weren't a music major.
No, not at all. I was an econ major. So I was at that point, I could gig and I had enough skills on the violin. I played well. I had a lot of success as a child. But I mean, compared to all the people graduating Curtis and Juilliard and you name it, like I was behind big time. And then I decided after that to get certified to teach music myself because I thought I'd follow my father's steps because he was gigging a lot and doing a lot of like work as a freelancer. But then he eventually became a school teacher and a music strings teacher, string specialist. And I thought, well, I'll just probably just do what he did. And that's when I got my certification to teach music. And so I did that, got all the, the normal things. I did my student teaching and whatnot. And it was in that student teaching, and that at that point where I started to kind of get a little bit more serious in the violin. And then just little by little, I started practicing more, enjoying it more. And I'll never forget the one day where this little girl was subbing in this middle school, and I basically was called in to sub for this band class, and it was like 52 kids smashed in this little room, and it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And I always had my violin with me, and I just would practice in between if I had a chance, just because I wanted to just do something. And this little girl came and she's like, wow, you're really good. Really sweetly. And I'm like, oh, thanks so much. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Maybe I should really start playing the violin. And then I asked my dad, I said, Dad, do you think I have a shot at getting back into this? And he's like, of course you do. He's like, you still sound really good. Why not? And so I started taking lessons. And I actually applied to Peabody Conservatory, but I decided that I didn't want to spend more money on college at that point because I was broke already. And I had the loans to pay for my first college. And I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. So, and I had to buy a violin too. I really didn't have a good violin. So
Yeah.
between all those things, I was kind of in a pickle. And I just said, I'm just going to start taking lessons and work on my excerpts. And that's what I did. And I went from teacher to teacher to kind of, figured out who's a good teacher. I studied with a lot of different people and I kind of made my own way, and did more freelancing, then got really kind of more, equipped to freelance and better at my skills and whatnot. And then before you know it, I was really heavily on the audition circuit and getting close. And then sure enough, my dream job, I landed first time around in the first violin section of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And it was,
That was
I
the first
still
time you
can't.
auditioned for Philly?
No, it was the second or third time. Here's the thing that was really when I knew I had a shot was very early on. I decided, not very early, like somewhere in the middle of this, I'd say 2 or 3 years before I got in the orchestra, I did take an audition for the sub list. And I did really well. I kind of outplayed and outdid myself. And I don't know what happened before. I had a great day and I just because I think I was so loose and I had no expectations, I just went into it just thinking, well, I'm just going to do this. I didn't even tell my parents I was doing this. I just went in there and I got on the sub list. And when I told them, they were shocked. They're like, how did, it was because I didn't even say I was going to do this. And next thing you know, I'm on the sub list. And that's when I said, okay, I got to really work my tail off. And that's when, and I really practiced like never before for that, to take auditions. And I learned excerpts like crazy, and I was really working hard on all this stuff. And I always, and this is the thing I tell all my students, all I cared about was just getting better. And I said, if I just keep getting better, the job will come. And that's kind of what happened, thankfully. And I'm really, really, I'm so blessed and so privileged to play with a great orchestra. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd get my first choice job first. It just happened that way. So
cool. So, but you said how many times, because I know sometimes people don't win like the first time, sometimes they don't hire people and then you have to go do that again. So did that happen?
Yeah, that did happen. Well, what happened was I got really close in LA. That was the first time when I really played well in an audition.
Okay.
I was like this close together, like, an inch away. And that was when I knew, okay, I got to just keep doing it. But that was like a year and a half or 2 years before I actually got in the orchestra. I still was doing other auditions. There was one other audition for the Philadelphia Orchestra I did take it was a second chair of the second violin section. And I got in the finals or the semifinals there. And I did play well, but it still wasn't ready. And I still had to do work. And then I got in the finals at a lot of, like in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and, I got really close and I knew it was it was going to happen eventually. And I always just knew, like, when the time was right, it will happen. And when I think back at how I played for the audition, I did eventually wind up winning. I really was most nervous for that first round, as you always are. And then as the rounds went on, I felt more and more comfortable, and it just seemed to flow. And by the end, I almost knew I was going to win because it's just like I feel so prepared. I feel like I've worked my tail off. This seems like this. I feel like I can kind of picture it happening before it's happening. So
that's cool.
So
that's awesome. So you've been in the orchestra since when did you get in?
I won my audition in October of 1997, and I started in January of 1998. So
nice.
It's almost like 23 years now. So
that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It is. Time flies. But yeah, so I mean, it's the funny thing is that even though I got in the Philadelphia Orchestra, there was always this feeling of like, wow, how did I do this? But yet I was so happy to be there, but still somewhat intimidated by the fact that I sit around a lot of people that went to Curtis, Juilliard, and whatnot, and very few that have, there's one other orchestra member that didn't have a normal route there, but it's generally, I was definitely more unconventional, I guess.
Right. And so what I love about the story is that you just did the thing that you need to do to win an audition, which is really play your excerpts and your solo, obviously, really well and master the audition process. And so, like, I remember feeling really frustrated in school about that because, like, especially when I was in my master's program, because I was like, this is all I want to do. I already know I want to do that. So why do I have to, like, take all these history classes again and all that? And so, I know some people really like that stuff, and sure, it's good to know, that, which you can find out on the internet now.
Right.
So in my opinion, in my humble, crushing classical opinion, I think that maybe not so humble. I think that going forward, it's not going to be necessary to go $200,000 into debt so that you can have a degree that you don't need for the job that you're trying to get, because no orchestra cares if you have a master's degree or even a bachelor's, as long as you nail the audition. And so,
That's true. And I kind of had that feeling, eventually,
they
especially when
didn't
I got on
say,
the sub
oh,
list.
you won. And then they didn't say, oh, you have an econ degree. Like, they didn't care.
Yeah, I think, they have the resume that you give to
Exactly.
them. And, but they still can't technically reject you. If you want to play, they legally have to let you play. So I knew that, and I'm thinking, well, I remember, and I found this out later as I was in the orchestra, that there was always a guy that's a cab driver from New York that would always play every Philadelphia orchestra, because he loved the Philadelphia orchestra, and they would always have to let him play the audition, and they always knew who it was. It was kind of humorous. Like, if anyone had a bad audition, it's like, oh, is that the cab driver?
That's funny.
But yeah, but
that reminds me of a tuba player who would always stand outside the orchestra hall downtown Chicago, playing whatever. He was like a homeless guy who had a tuba.
Right. So funny. But yeah, I mean, like, I think finding your way these days in the music business there's so many options now with social media. There's so many ways to do it and kill it. Like, and you have to think outside of the box. And I say this to my students. I said, of course, when I was younger, I thought, okay, I'm either going to be a teacher, or I'm going to play in the orchestra, or I'll gig. It's like one of those three things, because that's all I knew. Yeah, that's all I knew. My dad did both, and so did my uncle as well. And then I had other uncles on my mom's side that were one was a jazz pianist that was basically, that was his side job, but he was a very fine jazzer, and her other uncle, or my other uncle, was also in the a music educator. So that's all I knew. And now I just feel like, wow, the possibilities are endless, and just like all kinds of music that there are niches for, it's pretty incredible, honestly.
It is. So how did you start to think more entrepreneurial, like in terms of your teaching career? Because I know that's kind of where we met in the scope of things. And now you're really, you're doing Instagram. Like, when we first met, you didn't have any Instagram followers, and now you have like almost 6,000 or something insane like that.
I was not I have to admit, I did not like social media, and I still don't really care for it so much. And I'm trying to back away from anything.
But it's a means to an end, because you have to be visible. Yeah, you have to be visible. That's what somebody told me.
They said that to me. Like, there's no other way to get yourself out there. I mean, that's how it's happening now. And I thought, okay. And as much as I used to be on Facebook a little bit, I eventually didn't do as much Facebook, but I noticed Joe Conyers, who's one of my colleagues, and we were talking, over like, wow, Joe has all these followers, and we were just talking about him over dinner one time in Vail, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, and it's amazing what you can do just with that visibility. You have a lot of power in that sort of following, and you can easily just kind of, as you were saying, what was the word you used? If you want to have a partnership with that, and there's a word that you used, I think we were talking about, have that person, what's it called again?
Oh, like affiliate?
Yeah, an affiliation, exactly. And do affiliations and stuff. I mean, you could be a
power
student
in just having an audience.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And this is what's happening to lots of students that have really good Instagram pages. I mean, the other one that I met who subbed with the orchestra, he was the runner-up for the second chair, was Nathan Chan. Amazing Instagram page. He's really clever, really funny, really entertaining, does extremely fun things to watch, and it's just pure entertainment. And that is just a gift that you can really, start to learn. And I feel as if you have a good on-camera presence, and if you have a good personality, and if you have a nice face, you could do a lot with your gram. And I'm not saying I have all those things, but I feel as if I could be marketable and just sell who I am, because I think that's kind of what you're doing. I mean, that's how that viola kid did it. I mean, there's so many stories like this where that's how you just make a following.
That's what Two Set did.
Yeah, exactly. And they're highly entertaining.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, all these people that we're mentioning, except for Nathan Chan, I haven't had him on, but
Mm,
they've been on the podcast, and
right.
I was lucky enough to ask TwoSet to get on my podcast in 2017 when they were uh, pretty new,
Right.
and that was super fun to be able to talk to them because I remember them telling the story about that the first time their video went viral, and it took a couple of years for a video to go that viral.
I believe
But
it.
but what they did was they created their own career. Like, I mean, there have been classical musician comedians, like
Right.
maybe two, right? But they're doing that in a completely new way on using social media only. And they, I mean, they do have an in-person concert that they did. They did a world tour. But yeah, that's a great example of people who have built such a big following around themselves. They don't teach violin, but they sell lots of merchandise
Right.
and maybe they promote other people's stuff and you can make a career or you can definitely create income streams that way. So anyway,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you started to build the audience around yourself with the intention of teaching, correct?
That's correct. Correct. And let me just say, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to
Right.
work at it.
No, I
It
know.
is a skill, and I've gotten coachings for it, and I've learned the skill, and I've gotten better at it, and I'm still getting sort of trying to learn my way and find new ways to kind of put that good video out there and put good content. So, but I did it. Yes, my initial reason was to have students, and long story short, I made a major move in terms of geographically. I was living in Pennsylvania, and certain things happen in life, and you're thinking, well, this isn't, I need to kind of get myself and hit the reset button. That's why I moved an hour and a half the opposite direction of where I used to live, and instead of being an hour left or west of Philly, I'm an hour east of Philly. And I was like, well, all my students, I would drive up and see them every once in a while. But then eventually, that, of course, with the pandemic, that all ended as well. And basically, I'm so glad that I started this even before the pandemic, because I was already, I had a quicker route to kind of build my teaching audience, and
Mm-hmm.
and it gave me even more sort of an urgency to kind of get things moving. And that was the reason. Yeah, I wanted to do more teaching, and I still want to do more teaching, and I still want to connect. And it's funny, like as things we get back to somewhat sense of normalcy and there's auditions, I think there's going to be a lot more potential for even that much more, ability to reach people all over the world, honestly.
Exactly. And because of this kind of work stop, a lot of people have been um, creating their online presence and teaching online and who knows what will happen in terms of what's possible for people to get ready for those auditions, right? Like it's
Absolutely. I
getting
mean,
really different.
there's a lot of musicians that want to get better. And if I knew back in the late 90s, I could have a lesson with someone like, in Cleveland, like Bill Prusel, and I could do it online, I would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. I mean, I know
Yeah.
it. I didn't, and if I save me a drive to Cleveland or a flight to some other, or to Anshul Brusilov down in, he passed away, but in SMU, and getting a lesson and listening to him. I mean, that would have been amazing. I would have definitely paid for something like that. And
No
people
kidding.
like to poo-poo like the sort of online teaching. I think it's such an incredible, of course there's a little less than what's in person, but I think I've seen my own students get so much better over time, given that it's been only online. It has not stopped their progress as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And let's talk about that, like what online opens up because you and my husband are creating a really cool thing. And what I love about it is how you're bringing together all these people from who probably normally, like if you were doing an in-person thing, these particular people would not,
But they would be busy. Yeah.
they would be busy and it would be too expensive to have them. Right.
Right. You couldn't, of course. Yeah. I mean, talk
So
about the airfare, the
no
I
kidding.
mean, it would have been impossible. So go ahead.
Yeah. So tell us about it because I mean, I already know about it, but tell the story of how you pulled together the
Yeah.
side
Well,
stuff.
this is so cool. Like, I mean, like we already talked about, I got to know you through coaching,
Uh-huh.
over a year ago. And we were actually supposed to meet in person
Yeah.
like a
Right
month
before.
after this whole, right? Yeah. And we were going to, and I was actually going to, and I was really looking forward to actually see these people in person. But
Yeah.
obviously that didn't happen. And then little by little, I don't know, you have to remind me. You told me about David, your husband,
Because
and
you guys are very similar. And so
okay,
at some
okay,
point, I think I just said, you guys should just talk.
yeah, and we
And
did.
then you
Yeah.
did, and then you invited him to teach it in some of
Right,
your
that's right. I
classes,
invited
and
to
you guys
have him.
did like a swap.
Exactly. We did
Yeah.
some swapping of teaching, and we have a great synergy and chemistry together. And I really love, I think, like I was telling my wife, we have such different roles within what we do because he's a concert master and I'm a section player.
Hmm.
And I feel as if, and we know a lot of different people. Some of them are the same, but we have a lot of connections to different people. And doing things together, it's funny, I just don't even remember how it, like, other than that, but I think we just hit it off so well that we were just having
Yeah.
phone conversations talking about whatever, whether it was musical or not. And we just really enjoyed each other's company. And then next thing you know, David said we should do a summer camp. And I kind of wasn't sure because I had done one myself, but then I thought, wow, you have these connections to people that I don't. And to have the combined forces to do this, there's a lot of work to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I would have been able to do it without each other doing their own roles. I'm doing a lot on the gram, making videos. He's doing a lot of emails, reaching out to certain musicians like Augustine Halleck and Jimmy Ennis that I knew them, but I didn't know them nearly as well as David did. So it was
Hmm.
a great combination of efforts to put on this Violin Virtuoso summer camp. And I'm so excited to have this camp happen. I think we're really putting, and you've also inserted a certain amount of interesting ideas in this camp, like listening lab, that I think are going to be exceptionally fun and exceptionally educational. So it all has come together so wonderfully, and it's been so exciting. It's funny. I literally drove to Florida the day that we decided to do this, and I've been here now for about almost 5, 6 weeks, and I've been working really hard on this, enjoying, of course, the time in Florida. But this has just been an incredible, like, of time of work and inspiration, really, more than anything, putting on this program.
It's so cool. And you're in Florida, and we're in Mexico.
Right. That
And
was the other. That was the other thing. Like, he told me he's in Mexico. I'm like, I thought I had a bad connection, didn't hear him well over the cell phone, and like, Mexico. I'm like, are you serious? And like, sure enough, yeah. So yeah, you've been in Mexico, and I really
yeah.
look forward to the day we actually all meet in person. But it's
Yeah.
going to probably be a little while. But but anyway, but it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, it sure has. And I like watching you guys work together, because I think that's the other thing that becomes possible online is, I mean, since everything happened, well, no, before, because we were in that program together
We were doing because
before COVID.
yeah.
And, the networking and the meeting, when you get to meet other people in those kind of settings too, and that's what's going to happen in your camp this summer. I mean, it's just the same. People are always like, oh, school, college, one of the main reasons to go to college is because you meet people. But in these kind of group programs, you meet people too, even if it is online. So, I'm not opposed to in-person stuff, man. Like, being in person is great, but what online opens up for people is really great. Like, you could not get James Ennis and Augustine Hadelich in the same camp in person. Like, if things were normal, they would be touring. They would be, in Europe or wherever. And so it's really exciting. And then kids get the opportunity to play for these world-class soloists. Like, it's insanity how cool that is. Plus they get to study with you guys and some other really great artists and concert masters and people from big.
I'm really looking for and the other thing is, like, I don't know Andres Cardenas that well. I know that he worked a lot with Roberto Diaz, who was the former principal viola of the orchestra, and they were in a trio together. But I did not know him. I never met him personally, so I'm actually really looking forward to meeting.
So you're going to meet more. You're going to get to
I'm meeting more people
better too
as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
what are you finding as you promote it? What are you finding about your target market? Because this is something I work with my clients with too. Because a lot of times people, we should talk about this, because a lot of times my clients are like, well, I don't know who my ideal client is. I don't know who it is. And what I always say is, you find out when you start putting your messaging out who is attracted. You get to decide somewhat. Like, you get to say, like, I serve violinists who are like between a certain age or at a certain level. But then you start to see who comes to you. And I've definitely seen that in my business. And it's really interesting to see, because I find that, I could help someone have just sort of a straight up violin lesson studio, but everyone that I work with ends up being people who want to combine some other kind of creative piece of their intelligence or their knowledge, of their passion, of their anything else that's like part of them. And that's kind of what I've always been talking about on Crushing Classical,
Right, right,
like bringing other parts of, like your skills and what you care about, like David with working out in a way that makes violin playing easier and
right.
better. Like that's something that not every violinist is going to teach. So, and that's what I find generally comes to me when I put out messaging. So how about you? How's that working out for you as far as like who's being attracted to your offers right now,
Well, it
or that
seems
offer?
like right now it seems like to be two categories, I would say. Um, like I going back a year, I had a client in my boot camp, and she's going to be doing this camp as well. And she's a seasoned professional as on viola, but she
Mhm.
really wants to get better at the violin because she misses that time where she was playing the violin, and she's very capable on the violin, but she's more, obviously a professional violist. So this has been sort of a nice other sort of way. And I have another fellow that seems like he's going to join up. That he's in my group class. Same thing. He's a violist, but wants to get his violin chops
Mm.
better and work on that. I really find it interesting in these times where I think you can find. I hate to use the word hobbyist because sometimes they're better than just hobbyists. They're not someone that just wants to pick up the violin and got one off of eBay and just wants to get. You always have that too, but there are people that never quite either arrived or where they, to where they wanted to play, or they didn't really derive that much happiness with their instrument or their violin. And I feel as if I have a special bond or with some of these people because I get it. Because if you didn't go the traditional route, there's so many ways to enjoy playing the violin outside of just being in an orchestra. Whether it's teaching or giving of yourself in some way of just playing your violin. I mean, I have one student that I just adore. He was in my boot camp last year, and he loves to sing, he loves to perform, but he's not in any. I mean, he doesn't do this professionally, but he really loves the violin, and it's something that's very therapeutic for him. And sometimes our lessons are more talking than actually playing because we just want to talk about the mentals or what we get out of the violin and how to kind of get you know into a place of just having the freedom of just playing without being you know occupied with like negative thoughts or whatever, just something that just as a release. And I know David practices a ton on his own, and so do I. And I love to play. I just love to play. And there are plenty of people that just love to play their violin, that just want to sound good. And I appreciate that. So
Mhm.
that's one part. And I think then the other part is definitely our aspiring musicians, whether trying to get an orchestral job, you know, um, get, or into school or just up there playing that are students. And that's definitely the other half of people. I'd say those are the two um, main audiences, I guess you could say.
Awesome. That's so great. So when does it start?
Yeah, the starts the last week of June, and then it's basically 5 days a week, just weekdays, last week of June and then the first week of July. And
Hmm.
then we do that's all going to be mostly just working on your technique, working on your scales, working on your concertos, working on your skill sets, musicality. That's where we're going to do like this thing that you coined listening lab, that I love because this is what we do. And that's going to be a big part of this. And let me just talk about that for a second, because I
Yeah.
love the idea of this, because this is what I did all the time with my dad. It
Uh-huh.
was listening lab all the time. We didn't have YouTube videos, so we couldn't, sometimes something would come on the television, watch Perlman or whatever, but that was a rare. You just had to happen to like catch it or know that it was coming on television on the TV guide. But generally speaking, my dad had albums and we just listened and listened. And I knew so much about orchestral repertoire just because my dad was there and he had a record habit and like an audiophile. He just loved audio equipment, and we just play music all the time. And it was so much fun to just sit back and listen to all the great pieces that I eventually wound up playing in the orchestra. And so that was a lot of fun. And we do that anyway as musicians. When James Ennis comes to the orchestra, I'll talk to another man like, "Could you hear how he did that, or what he did in the third movement, or in that cadenza, or like I never heard that before." And this is how we geek out as musicians, and we talk about it, whether it's at the bar after a concert when you're on tour or whatnot. That's the fun of it, and that's that part of it brings the community. So that part of this camp is going to be really, really fun, I think. And of course, we're just going to do a lot of working on like I said, our skills. And then the second part of the camp is going to be geared more for orchestral excerpts and getting your skills and excerpts and whatnot, and your auditioning skills, your mental skills, and knowing how to approach auditions for that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, I think it's August 9th. I forget the date. I think it's second week of August for 7 days straight, all days included. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm so looking forward to this. I'm also really looking forward to just doing it with your husband Dovid, because I love whenever we have done classes together. I think our classes are way better when both of us are in the same sort of Zoom room, because we bounce ideas off of one another as professionals. So and the other things, like I was saying before, like I love, just like the last class we did, we did a free excerpt class, and hearing David play an excerpt is so different than the way I play an excerpt. And that's mostly because he's a concert master. And you can see that come out in his playing. And he has such a different approach. And that's why I love this sort of, like I say, the chemistry we have, because we look at things and play way differently because of our roles in the orchestra. And I think there's something to be said for that.
That's really interesting, because, obviously you audition for different roles, and
right.
It would be good to keep that in mind when you're doing it. So
I think over the years too, I've become more of a section player. It's what I do. And I think David sounds like a concertman. When he plays his violin, it's like, wow, okay, I got to sound like a concert master when we played that Bach double on that video we made, because he has a sound that's a very concert master like sound. And I love it. It's just, I'm more accompanimental, and I'm just like I say, I'm one to be more in the background, because that's what I'm called to do, rather than be overly overpowering and leading.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right. You'd get in trouble if you were doing that from the back, right? Well, that's cool. And I like that you bring up that different dynamic too, because that's another aspect of what makes your offer unique as opposed to someone else's offer. And that's what I work with my clients. And so, like, to highlight the differences is how you can be in a space with people and not worry about competition, quote unquote, because, there's always going to be competition in every space. And actually, if there is competition, by the way, that's a good sign. That means that the market is asking for a thing and it's working. Like, if you create something and nobody has ever done it, well, then it's your job to prove that people want it. And if it's already being proven, like there's already other people doing it, then you know that it's proven already. You don't have to do that part. So this is really exciting. I love it. And I'll make sure that in the show notes, there's a link to, because people book a appointment to interview,
absolutely.
Right?
That's right.
So they can interview. And if there are violinists, any violinists, especially violinists who are looking to get jobs when auditions start up again. So
yeah, I mean, Dub and I were just talking about it today. I mean, like, I really look forward to being able to kind of be there for the next audition for my clients, and that's what we've all been missing. Like, there's nothing, we feel sort of empty because we don't have that next thing to do. And I remember that's what I loved actually about the audition circuit, is that I had this plan of where I'm going to go next and which audition excerpts I got to learn, which concerto I'm going to, and how I'm going to kind of like systematically put this all together, and having that that was a little bit of a thrill for me. And I kind of love that. And I think that's why I have this sort of entrepreneurial need. I was not that I get bored playing in the orchestra, but I needed to feel like I'm doing something just in addition to it to kind of keep my
and that's, you bring up a good point, because honestly, the audition circuit and the audition game is entirely different from having a job. And so I know there is a shift after you get a job and you're done with that quest, because it's a quest.
Right.
And when you don't have that thing to look forward to, when you don't have that real reason, concerts are a reason to practice, but usually you get everything pulled together by the concert, and stress and pressure is nothing compared to an
Well,
audition.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. When you play in the orchestra for 20 years, you know the rep.
Yeah,
I know
I
it
did it for
so
10
well.
years. It was
Right.
like the same orchestra for 10 years, you know, it was
It
like,
doesn't take much work for me to get up and play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I just be honest with you because it's just
right.
I've done it so many times, and an orchestra can play. The Philadelphia Orchestra can easily play 12 concerts in 12 nights, all different programs, all in one rehearsal because we have all that experience. And
Yeah.
after 20 years, not that it gets old, it's just that you want to constantly feel like you're growing, and that's how I look at
And
this.
business is definitely a personal growth
Yeah.
path. It really is. I mean, because there's a lot, there's a lot to deal with, and a lot of times it's your own self that you're kind of battling with when it comes to having to do certain things, put yourself outside of your comfort zone and all of that. You know, as you venture out into building an audience, creating offers, putting price tags on those offers and selling them to people. That's how
That's a
you make
skill.
money without having an employer.
Mhm.
And it's confronting because it's up to you to do all of it. And there's an impact if you don't fail. You don't make the money and the thing doesn't happen. So, you know, so yeah, it is like a really related to personal growth. And I've talked about that a lot on interviews and my podcast and stuff too. So I'm sure you're experiencing it.
Yeah, and I enjoy the growth of it because I like the pressure. What
Yeah.
happens, like I say, if
The
you sit
pressure.
in a section, you don't feel the same amount of pressure that you feel as if you have a solo. I'm
True.
sorry. I'm sure David has a lot more pressure on him. I know I've sat assistant concertmaster acting for 1 year, and there was a lot more pressure on me sitting up front with all eyes looking at what I'm doing and making sure that I know my part. You can, and I don't say you can coast, but you can coast in a certain way only because of experience and you can sort of zone out unfortunately, but
I know.
that's on you to kind of keep yourself motivated, and that's another kind of growth that you need to do. Like I always wonder, like I have a friend that played Beauty and the Beast in New York for, like, I'm sure for years, and I'm like, how could you do that? I think I would probably go bananas.
Yeah.
Like after a while, I don't think I could play the same piece for or
I
show.
know.
I think that would be so hard. And that to me is like a little bit of a sense of torture and just being stuck in that pit playing the same thing. But I guess you learn how to sort of grow out of that, and you have to be. I think you need to be built for that. That's for sure. You need to be built for
Definitely.
that kind of lifestyle. And I don't think I am. I know I need something to do. Like everyone says, Rich can't sit still. He has to be doing something. And my wife says it. Like I'm like a working dog. I need activity. I'm not one to just sit on my phone and just play or watch TV. I need to feel like I'm motivated and growing, and that's kind of just I've been that way my whole life. So
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And that it shows in the career you've created and it shows in the business you're creating now. So
it's a
it's
lot of fun.
awesome.
I enjoy it. I enjoy waking up thinking, okay, what do I got to do? you know, there's no grind to it. It's like me and David always have something new to do, and we get on the phone and call. Okay, what's our next thing we have to kind of accomplish? And I love that. It's not I took the opt out for the orchestra this year just because I wanted to kind of I had this chance, and like it gave me this unique time to do something like this that I not definitely would not have had. I definitely
Right.
even would have thought of. And now that I had this opportunity, I'm like, let me take this and let me kind of work really hard to kind of move myself ahead, and because ultimately I think it's better for me to be motivated and play and come back to the orchestra refreshed and ready to go and just have with a renewed sense of purpose. I think these are all good things.
Absolutely. So what's the website? I'll link it in the show notes,
Oh
but
yeah,
what
it's the violinvirtuosos.com.
great.
So it's www the volume. So yeah, and it's all there, and it's all going to be there for a while because there's going to be a lot of things coming. I think we're going to be just check us out. You can always go and look on my Instagram page at Amoroso Violin, and of course Dovid's his fittest violinist, and we're easy to find. But I'm always posting. I post almost every day and put a story on just to kind of keep relevant, keep things going. It's hard to kind of keep up with everything to a certain extent and know what the next move is all the time. That's what I find the most not frustrating, but a little bit difficult. Is like, what do you do the next day? How do you stay present? How do you stay in touch with your audience? And how do you keep
Mhm.
them still, entertained, or I hate to use that word, but still following you and
Engaged.
meaningfully engaged. That's the best word. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to do. And I just, I don't want to kind of be overly predictable sometimes. At the same time, I want to give, my followers what they want, and keep
Totally.
them engaged. So,
Well, you're doing a great job. I think it's awesome. And I can't wait to see how
oh,
this
I can't
goes.
either. This
It's
is
going to
going
be
to be
so
a lot of
awesome.
fun. Yeah.
Thanks for being on, Rich. This has been so
Sure.
awesome. And everyone's going to be.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I have to say, Tracy, you've also been an inspiration even before, like, you're the reason why I started my podcast. And I think I'm going to start a
Awesome.
different podcast with this listening lab. And that's also has everything to do with you and your influence. So I really appreciate your time. And I really always enjoy talking to you, Tracy.
Awesome, Rich. Thank you so much. I was so happy about
Well, you're
that.
welcome.